From here, the facilitators or participants, if wanting to, will be able to share their thoughts and opinions during your guys' conversation that you had. You can join, or you can share on the chat box, or you can share your opinions verbally. But if group one wants to start,
Would
Did a
Kenny
good job.
or
It was pretty good. We shared on so before we came to the room, we were just sharing about how does our cultural view affect us in a negative way. So we basically talked about how as growing up, how our future, how like the elders in the families were they how they use the guilt card, how they use the and it as we grow older and older and we move on, well, it'll end up letting us use it against the younger generations, right? If anyone from Group One wants to elaborate more on it.
Yeah, let me. I'll add with to what John was saying. First of all, I just want to. I just want to. Thank you guys for this discussion. All right, and then also with John, you can totally see that you're taking in all this information. One of the things that we talked about is how important it is for us to try to understand. Kind of if we're trying to bridge that gap is one on our end, on the youth end, is try to understand our parents and understand our culture and why certain things are done, um, and then we can it's easier for us to try to help them to understand on our perspective or the youth perspective on how maybe some of those things that were done in the past, how it kind of interferes or clashes with with your current life and the challenges that you're facing, and then how sometimes for parents, if they use certain things to try to motivate us, but sometimes they don't realize the impact it has, right? Like what John had mentioned, if they use the guilt trip or they use certain things or on threaten us or things like that, to get us to do something, that the more that they understand how that impacts us or the youth, and have more information, then maybe that might help them to change kind of the things that they do. I think those are some of the stuff that we had discussed.
thank you so much for sharing. And I think like when you mentioned that a lot of the things you gotta bridge that gap, it's really it's really hard with this as well because sometimes the youth are not very involved or engaged with their own youth, so it's kind of difficult for them to understand like this same information that they're getting or looking for this information that is being given. But I don't think a lot of people know about that, especially for those who are on the marginal areas, those who aren't very aware or very tech savvy, or those who just simply don't see a problem, or those who are like in denial as well. It's kind of hard to just address this kind of stuff with them. But I think with what you guys mentioned about having the conversation or just talking about it or bringing it up, speaking to people, I think that's a great way to start. And with the guilt trip kind of thing, I also see it personally, but it's difficult because you know that you want to do it, but then it's hard because oh, they're making you feel bad and stuff like that. But if the youth had more information about this, I feel like a lot of people would benefit from this as well. Like having this conversation right now, this is very beneficial for like almost all people on this call. And so I appreciate Group 1 for sharing. Group 2, would you like to share, Leilangi, or anyone from our group about
Um,
any of the questions? Yes.
sorry, Vina, before we go on ahead and share, but just to kind of go back to that topic about bridging that gap, I think one important thing that was shared in our conversation was it was a response to question number one, which was how can we move towards normalizing conversations on LGBTQ, substance abuse, teenage pregnancy, and emotional and economic abuse? And I think going off that topic with bridging that gap is important. And as Robert and Twaya, they were explaining, where it's establishing a relationship and commonality with people is really important in finding common ground to help start those conversations. And I think with us, it's learning to bridge that gap with the generations before us. And, you know, our generation now is, you know, Jennifer mentioned in our discussion as well, where it's, you know, our generations change, you know, generation after generation, where it's my mom is different, my grandma is different, and they have, you know, what they have learned from their generations, and using what they have learned from their generations and mixing it with ours is important in bridging that gap, and learning to find that relationship with the older generations is important in starting these changes. And I just wanted to add that in, and thank you guys for letting me share.
If anyone else would like to add, of course, the floor is yours. I'm sorry if
Yeah,
I cut off anybody earlier.
I just want to just put this little blurb in, and like what Cammie's saying, I think one of the things that I also want to leave with you all as you are young and as you get a little bit older and older, there's youth behind you. So these comments that you're saying now, you have because you're much more aware of it and you're enlightened. Now you have that responsibility to continue to bridge the gap and remember what it was like for you all as you're coming, because you're going to have much more tech savvy. These people are going to be even more informational than you are, and reminding yourself what it was like and how do you bridge the gap with them. So it's not just us that are old already, but it's reminding that you'll be there too. And so the healthy thing is to how do we continue to have these conversations in a healthy way that is respectful, that is safe, that allows us to move forward, move our community work forward, and not escalate the violence that we have in generations that, you know, continuing this. But that was just it. Thank you.
And also just to add on, it's important to understand that, you know, you want to have these discussions before you have it with your parents, right? That's the whole reason why we're trying to learn and practice sharing your thoughts and your feelings, and you want to do that in an environment that is receptive to that, right? So it's not just after this, okay, now you go and talk to it's your parents. If you understand that your parents are not, or if there are people who are not receptive, you want to make sure, because even in our discussions, you can tell that there's still people who's trying to process this information, right? And then when they try to share, they still don't have the words. But the more we engage in this discussion, the more you will develop that skill and that strength and that confidence, so that when you do need to talk to your parents about certain things, you have that developed. So that's something that's to make sure, we're not saying just go tonight and go talk to your parents about, and then also just, not, making sure to have just um, superficial conversations with your parents before you bring out the big guns, like I have a boyfriend and we're gonna, like those kind of discussions. You want to learn to develop, a certain type of relationship with parents, because our parents have to learn how to make adjustments as well too, right? They're used to what they're used to, and in any relationship, we have to develop, and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that we're all learning, even our parents, they don't know everything. and let's help strengthen that gap between us. Another thing that I would like to share with from our group was answering question number 4, which was what wellness looks like to us and what can wellness look like in our culture. And although we didn't really answer it, but what wellness looks like to us, Robert brought up a good point of self-awareness. The more aware we are of ourselves in each domain, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, the better we can address it. And understanding our culture and principles can help enable us to change these methods and to help lead us towards wellness. So thank you for sharing that, Robert. I just wanted to echo that back to the big group.
Anyone else want to share anything? All right, so group 2, which is Leilani and I's group. There was a lot of conversations, but I'll give it to Leilani to share the ones that she found very important to this discussion.
So one of the questions that I wanted to share what we gathered was the third question, which is how our cultural view affects us in a negative way. So the main point of all the information we got was it isn't the culture, but it's how the person was raised or how the person views the culture. For example, how in the olden days we used the new, and now people use a bottle of wine or something to substitute for the new. So the item is changing, but the meaning is still the same. And it's like the Bible. Everyone has their own translation, the actions and practices, but it's the same.
I think another thing that was very insightful in our conversation was that a lot of people take things and understand things differently. Not all of us have the same mindset, nor do we have the same opinions, same thoughts, and same statements. So understanding that, and also understanding that our culture are two different things. Not just like, oh, because of so and so, that is why I am the ethnicity that I am. But in terms of like being able to know, like, understand the culture first and then focus more on the person afterwards. But I think, Kiso, if you would like to share more on what you mentioned during our discussion, that would be great.
Thank you, Fina. What I had mentioned in our group discussion was that this cultural side of me just can't stop, popping up. It's just, I'm just rooted in our culture. And I strongly believe that our culture doesn't have a negative impact on our Samoan community. It's the way we practice the culture that's creating the problem that we're facing right now. Olanganu Samoa, there's no such thing as a negative part of the culture. There's no part like that in the Samoan culture. And that's why I strongly believe that we must understand our culture first and be knowledgeable of our culture in order to move forward with continuing these conversations and leading the new norm. For example, bridging that gap, we need to integrate the culture in that. For example, when you talk to your parents, part of the culture is that you have to be respectful and be polite. Some youth members right now, they don't even consider that part of the conversation. They don't even respect their parents. They're not even polite. And so what do you expect in return as far as the reaction? Yeah, for the reaction, respect must be polite. So that's the culture that we have to educate our people about. When our people understand our culture, they will definitely know their place in society. And I think that our culture is the solution to domestic violence and sexual assault, aside from all the other government services that that we have available here in American Samoa. Because the fact of the matter is that the Samoan culture is not teaching us to go and fasio ko olua. Elio from Samoan culture, alwe fasiro ko olua sa nga. No. Ole oi mata ol tama olona tua fine. And so when you understand that concept of our culture, I don't think you would do such an action. I don't think you would beat up your wife, or vice versa. When we understand our culture, I tell you, we will see the decrease in the amount of sexual assault cases, domestic violence cases. So I just wanted to add that on, Fina. And it's just me, anyone that blames the culture for all of this, that's a debate right there. Yeah. So but thank you, Fina. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. I think another thing that we talked about during our conversation was that a lot of the conversations are very discussed. So one of them was questioning how can we promote the new norm? How can we start the conversation? And so I believe one of us, or Nerissa, who is here, she mentioned that because of the fact that we're not talking about it on a daily basis, it's harder for us to actually accept it. And so for that, it's just bringing it up into discussions and bringing it up for debate. Like if there are people that want to share it because of whatever reason, it's also good for us to start from somewhere. Something small, something simple, like a conversation between you and your friends. And I believe what Mariah is also saying as well in the chat, she mentioned that how the youth must come forward, and she agrees with that. I truly agree with that as well, because in order for us to make an impact in this community, we need to start getting involved, and we need to start moving forward and stepping into that area. So is there anything else that anyone wants to mention from group 2?
If I can just add, I'm sorry, I should have rose my hand through the system, but I want to piggyback on what Kiso said. You have to in order to really bridge the gap, you have to know the culture. You definitely need to understand what the Fa'asamoa stands for, and then be able to create those conversations that you can have that are safe to say, this is, if my sister is the apple of my eye, then I know that I am not to beat her, because you don't do that to the apple of your eye, right? And brothers are there to protect. But the flip side of it, there's also this US belief system that, when you have that, and Robert can also attest to this, is that when you allow men to have that powerful belief system, that then also goes to a negative where they then say, well, I have power over her, and if she doesn't listen to me, I can beat her. So you have to have knowledge about both of these aspects, and then to allow for the dialogue to say, well, these are safe practices. People, and having someone like Robert coming in that helps to develop communication and create good, healthier relationships, that also needs to be a part of the process for restoration. So it's a long process, but I think that we're much more familiar now with your group, your age, on how to get healthier, versus in my age group, it was a lot of alcohol, a lot of partying. So we drank a lot more, and we used that as a crutch to express ourselves and then to communicate and to feel good about each other. But I recognize in my age group, that's not the healthy way. It really is a lot of communication, and it's understanding each other. So that's just my thought.
I also want to add, one, just wanted to add to what Kiso had mentioned. Number one, I totally believe that our culture is one of, just like Kiso, I think our culture is one of the best cultures in the world, because of the principles that it's based on. I think when having this discussion, it's important for us to distinguish that there are cultural practices and cultural principles, right? And that when we maintain the cultural principles, man, our culture is the best culture in the world because of the principles that pretty much, like we mentioned in our discussion, that our culture is based on is just one, improving our relationship with the land, right? Our relationship with the land and eventually with God, right? Because the introduction of Christianity came later, but land and God and universe is all the same thing. So if you look at our culture, almost all the practices are based on improving or respecting the land, utilizing its resources, and our relationship with God. And the second principle was our relationship with each other, right? Everything that you do is based on improving our dava, right? Our relationship with each other. So yeah, so Kiso is right that when you understand those principles and when you see that there's certain practices that go against those principles, that they create a discrepancy, right? I think the problem is when we don't have a lot of these discussions, a lot of times people get confused with the practices. But when we talk about culture, because culture encompasses everything, it's important when you have a discussion on culture that we distinguish those things, because even with values, like the value of respect, right? So even though we teach respect, but then the culture also defines what is respect, right? And some of the ways that we demonstrate respect have to be changed, right? Some of the practices on how we demonstrate respect, because before the practice was you don't speak when spoken to, right? You don't have a say unless you're in a position to have. And the reason why those things were put into place, because back in the days before, you didn't, that was our education system, right? The only thing you needed to learn was from those who have come here before you, right? And that's the only information that you needed. So there was no reason for me to have a discussion with my parents on things because I didn't know anything. My parents and our ancestors have all the information. All I have to do is learn. But the thing is, we changed the environment into now, right? Right now, there's so much information that our parents and the Samoa is not the only way of living. But when we understand what the Samoa is, and we understand that there's other ways to do things, right? And we have that, that discussion, that dialogue, and our parents are open to that. But there was a reason why that thing was put into place, right? Now we're asking people to, it's not to don't share. Now we're trying to encourage people, to have a dialogue, encourage parents and children to have a dialogue. It still maintains the principle of respecting the relationship, improving our relationship, but we're changing the practices. So I think, the main thing is just, when we have a discussion of culture, it's important that we distinguish those things, because it's, a lot of times, like somebody mentioned, everybody has their own interpretation, of certain things. And the thing is, sometimes in our culture, we can develop bad habits, right? But we need to go back to what the original meaning was, like what Kiso had mentioned before, understanding the culture and what the original basis was. So.
Thank you. If I may, Ms. Fina, and so in addition to director and what Robert had mentioned, there's no part of the culture where it says, okay, you cannot speak on certain issues. I just want to make that clear, because that's one of the things that I'm hearing from the youth, is that they feel that they cannot share their perspective on certain topics such as sexual abuse, domestic violence, drug problem, No, the culture is not telling you to not share your perspective. The culture, however, is telling you to find the right time to share your perspective. Because of what? Because of Vafeloai. Because of Vafeloai. Vafeloai, when your parents okay you in your house, you don't answer right away. You don't answer back right away. Rather, you have to find the right time and the most respectful approach to talk to your parents. So the culture is not necessarily telling you cannot speak on certain issue. No, you can, but you just have to find that right timing and approach. If a forward 5 feet out, lim tu lang ang mafapin ina influencer solo lim tao. Thank you.
Also, and I'm gonna push back a little bit, Kiso, not to, but just on the culture does set some protocols, right? I mean, like you said, there's a right time, right? Then the issue comes, when is the right time to bring something up if you've been abused, right? That's and especially if you're abused by your own parents, right? Then the question comes, when is the right time, right? So that's why there's certain things that in the culture, it emphasizes the protocol, emphasizes respect. What happens when all of those are not being honored by the very same people who are supposed to protect, and that's when, but like you said, it is against the culture, as far as the cultural principles, but there's certain practices that is protocols that are in place that makes us think otherwise.
Thank you so much, you all, for sharing. Yeah, because our time is limited and we have to finish up this program. I appreciate everyone's feedback and everyone's ideas and thoughts, because this struck a very strong conversation that I think should continue even after this event. But thank you so much. We're actually going to do a wellness checkout. So um, now that we are nearing the end of our event, I hope everyone has enjoyed themselves so far. Some acknowledgement towards the project was supported by grant number awarded by the office, and since we've already reported and we'll be doing our wellness checkout, um, to Atsulevano ya Kami, if I might to Yasu.
Thank you, Fina. So I'll be leading us in a wellness checkout right now. For our wellness checkout today, I'm going to ask you guys, after hearing all this information, how are you feeling today? And you can share in the chat box or unmute yourselves to talk if you would like. Hopeful, I like that. Empowered, nice. Grateful, strong, thankful, enlightened, inspired, appreciated. Love to hear that. Not alone. You are not alone. So I'm going to ask you guys to close your eyes while I read some positive affirmations towards you to end your day. I'm going to begin right now. So if we could all close our eyes. So accepted. I see you, Raya. All right. We're going to first begin with a few deep breaths. Everybody breathe in and then breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. And just a reminder to you all, you're all strong, you're all kind, you're accepted, you are loved, and you are not alone. And I hope that throughout this conversation and throughout this presentation, you all felt well, you all felt accepted, and you felt safe here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cami. Yeah. Aveiro leo fatava if I mafonga ta moria tu leo fionga pule o le alliance leo fionga o Jennifer te whaono. Ia ave ile ava no fo yo lene aso. Ia. Ma le tato wheloa ina. ma le whaatasinga a wā ia i le whaamai fōi i le tupulanga taravau, i le whaatara noanga, tātou manulauti o le taitai whainga masangi fōu. E mori atu whaftai, e poia maulunga, ua tupu mai o le atunu o lo whaatasi mai i le nei tu la. Whaftai atu i le oto sapasapaya, tari sapaya fōi o lo mato whaatala ula atu. Ai mai se whaatasi mai o maupuepue maulunga le nei aso. Mori atu fōi whaftai i le wala aulia whapitoa i susunga fonga whapitoa mo whaatasi nei aso. Mori atu ai le wheu tā ua a wā o le tato o tā upu ai mai se fōi tato whatasinga nei aso whamalo whaftai. Mori atu whaftai i le au wala aulia ai mai se au mea mai uma na e whatasi mai i tato programa. A wā o tato whaatarata noanga i lunga le upenga ta whailangi. Ia, ai ai se sasi o se tautalanga i whamangana mai na auna. Tu ama fua, tsara whiriari, i whamunia le atua, i le whasausanga a le tato atunu. Whaftai. Thank you all for coming.
As you dive into summer, consider how COVID-19 is spreading in your community when choosing activities. Outdoor activities and visits are safer than those indoors, but fully vaccinated people can participate in most indoor activities without much risk. If you are not yet vaccinated, you should continue to practice prevention strategies, such as wearing a well-fitted mask, practicing physical distancing, avoiding crowds, and washing your hands. For more than a year, many people have focused on staying safe from COVID-19. While this continues to be important, returning to regular activities when you are fully vaccinated, such as travel, events, and other social gatherings, can provide hope for days ahead. In addition, taking simple actions such as deep breathing, physical activity, healthy eating, practicing good sleep habits, and safely connecting with family, friends, and neighbors can improve your well-being.